Monarch episode 6 is out. This is definitely better than last week. Probably one of the better episodes this season. Godzilla finally shows up, although it's for like 2 minutes, but still. The flashback to the 1950s timeline is also back on after a couple episodes not being around. There's still some weird choices. There's still stuff that I think is culture war motivated or whatever you want to call it that I just don't like, don't understand. And the present timeline still sucks. At this point, I don't know if the present day timeline has really accomplished anything other than kind of filling time with characters that are all really unlikable. And I actually think that this show probably could have gone from like episode 1 or 2 all the way to this one, like episode 3, 4, 5. I don't really think much got done there. I guess they were trying to do character stuff, but nothing productive came out of it since it just served to make you hate all of them. So you can make of that what you will. All right, well, let's get into it. So we go back to the 1955. There's a sign in the background that says what year it is. And there's a really weird decision here where Lee and Keiko are clearly having like an intimate moment and they're getting close to each other and they're like gonna hook up, then they get a phone call so they can't. And this is really weird to me because the first 3 episodes that they were in, Keiko had the chemistry with Randa and the kid's name is Hiroshi Randa. They say it a bunch, which is the dad of Kentaro and Kate. So they put this in. I don't know if this is to create drama or exactly what the purpose is, but the very first time they show up in the show is 1959. So they're having them like grow closer over the course of a few years, which we don't even really see on screen. And then all of a sudden they're going to be together. It's very odd to me. This little shindig is in DC. You can kind of see the sign in the background, but it's blurry. It says it's like the 1955 Sunshine Ball or whatever. So this is all the higher ups in the military. This is kind of like a political thing for them to get more funding and kind of secure their role in Monarch and all that. I'll also say that Keiko has better chemistry with both Randa and Lee than any of the characters in the present timeline have with each other. So I'm just going to throw that out there. So we get some more shit here where she gets introduced to the general. He's the one who helped give Godzilla the hydrogen bomb a few episodes ago. And he's the one kind of promoting Lee through the ranks. He's up to captain now. And they're getting introduced to like the higher ups in the military. After she says her name, one of the guys goes, "Japanese." And the general guy goes, "Oh, don't worry, she's one of the good ones." And this is the 1950s, so it's probably accurate. But I also think because of everything else in this show, that the people who wrote this think that that's also what modern day America is like, which is just super fucking annoying. And at the end of the day, we just got out of a war with a country that we dropped 2 atomic bombs on a decade earlier. So having somebody like that very high up in your classified intelligence in the military who's from the country that you bombed, I don't think there's anything wrong with being skeptical of her. Whether or not they're just being racist or skeptical because of the fact that she's from a country they just got out of a big war with, obviously they're probably going for the more racist angle. But as far as being skeptical, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Lee and Keiko are talking about the comment from General Puckett about her being one of the good ones, and she's pissed off, obviously, which is fair. But Lee's like, "Oh, look, they're old-fashioned." And then she's saying those old-fashioned men are going to blow up anything we find. And then Lee says, "Have you heard the phrase, 'to a hammer, everything looks like a nail'?" Because she's trying to pick fights with everybody all the time. But this is also a reference to Donald Trump. This is something that was very commonly said about him in politics. That's why I think this show is going for, clearly this is a racist angle and not they're skeptical for military reasons, which is unfortunate because 1, it's annoying, and 2, I think there would be a much more interesting angle to go to of like, hey, should we be trusting a Japanese national with nuclear weapons and this kind of technology and our high up military secrets after we just bombed their country? I think it's a shame in both ways, the writing and just the annoyance of culture war bullshit. And again, this is the type of thing that I would give charity to in a vacuum, but this show has used up all that charity in about 1 episode. After he says the thing about the hammer and the nail, he calls this place a hardware store. And then Keiko says, "In my country, we have a saying that the nail that sticks out gets hammered down." And then Lee says, "Not you, you'll change all their minds, even though they're old-fashioned," and blah, blah, blah. Kind of kissing her ass a little bit. So he asks her to dance because they're already there. And this is when they start getting close and kind of like touchy with each other. But also they make a point to show like half the people in the party just staring at them, presumably because they're also all racist and it's an interracial couple dancing. This is also part of why I said I think the race line is what they're going with here through this whole interaction. And they're really just shoving it down your throat. They're finally leaving the party or the ball or whatever you want to call it. And they're about to go up the elevator. And a guy comes up and he's yelling for Lee Shaw because he doesn't know what he looks like. And Lee keeps hitting the elevator button and he's like, "This elevator's slow." Because obviously he wants to take Keiko up to his room. And then he has to answer, and it's Randa saying, "Hey, we found something, you need to come out here." Back in the present day, Kurt Russell gets freed by, I've been calling her Ukrainian or Russian. I think she's actually French because he calls her Mademoiselle. So I guess the French chick whose name I can't remember. She betrays Monarch and takes Kurt Russell, and she's like, hey, you know something. What is it that you don't know? And he's like, if Monarch says that every person who's right is crazy, what are they doing to him, essentially? So they come to an understanding. This is where the phone call from May last episode comes in so that they can go meet up with our main 3 characters who all suck balls. Randa called. Keiko and Lee are being obvious about their attraction to each other and using informal nicknames and stuff, and he keeps having to correct himself. So he saw a big gamma spike. He asked her to take a look at it because that's her specialty, and now they're going to go figure out what's going on because he thinks there's another Titan coming. These 3 get back to their house from wherever they were, and Kurt Russell, Lee, and Frenchie are waiting for them on the couch, and they're like, how the hell did you get out of there? And he's talking about how he's smooth and blah, blah, blah. And essentially he's like, look, we need her help and resources. You guys don't have any way to get to where you need to go, pretty much. And Kate's like, screw that. She tried to kidnap us and threatened us and blah, 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 which is all valid. But they end up agreeing because they don't really have any choice anyway, because they actually don't have the resources or anything. So they agree it's going to be the 5 of them. We go back to Tim for a minute and his boss, whose name I also can't remember because she just hasn't had that much screen time, and honestly, I kind of check out when she's on screen. So I threw a tantrum last week about how much of an ass pull that scene was for Kentaro to figure out the map with the holes in the light and the Kmart Indiana Jones version with the holes in the light and the map on the wall. And they're having a discussion, and he literally walks up to the board and starts looking at pinholes because there's like groupings of pinholes. And then he asks the lady who's his boss, he's like, what did Hiroshi Randa get exiled for? And she tries to like play some word games, but eventually she tells him that he kept turning satellites that were facing space down to Earth and looking at gamma readings. So he starts marking out the pinholes, and I have no idea once again how he figured any of this out. He just circles the clusters where there's pinholes, which could just be where any normal person hung something up temporarily, replaced it, like a calendar, for example, or updates for whatever their data was, or whatever the case is. I mean, there's a million reasons to do it. Anyway, he circles the clusters, somehow knows exactly where to draw the map because he just visualizes it on the fucking thing. He says, if we look at these points and we think of it as a subway line, these are the next stops. And he starts going through the dates and days where different monsters showed up, starting with G-Day and the Titan that they ran into in the ice. All this bullshit for them to just figure out that it's Algeria where they need to go. Long story short. Verdugo is the lady's name. I could not remember it. So she makes her call and is like, we need to get to these places. Tell me where the gamma spikes are, blah, 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 blah. And we go back to the past timeline. We're at Hadaruma Island, which Google says is Japan, so the Pacific Ocean. And this big device that you're looking at is some sort of gamma simulator. And the guy explains pretty much what it does is sends out a gamma signal and then detects gamma also. So it's like a telephone for the monsters or the Titans. They go through all the mumbo jumbo, but that's the gist of it. They go to Algeria. That's where the gamma spike was. They're following their dad. May bitches at the French lady because she's like, this wasn't the deal that I wanted. I want to go home. And they all just kind of talk and complain. And Lee is like, look, I haven't taken the map from you. I haven't taken anything from you. You guys can leave whenever you want to. But I'm trying to help save millions of lives. So they all get guilted into staying. Back in the past, Randa tells Lee over a military radio phone, hey, this is what's going on. Could you send some people out here? Lee wants to go himself, and General Puckett, who's the antagonist, and this is more of the culture war shit that I was talking about, is like, he's always 100% bad, and he lives in a suburban neighborhood with a picket white fence and all the stereotypes of like 1950s white men. He hits like all of them. It's just so annoying. And it's the kind of stuff that most people probably wouldn't even notice. But I feel like once you notice it, you can't unsee it. He tells Lee, like, look, you're a captain. Captains need to sit in the office and send soldiers out. He tells Lee flat out, if you go, there will be consequences and you will have to face them. As in, you need to not go. It's a pretty clear thing. It's the military. And this is one of those things, too, that I can't tell if the show is anti-military or just doesn't understand it. Like, the military is not like the rest of society where it's classically liberal and you can make decisions for yourself and you can rebel against authority and do whatever you want. But the military has rules and superiors and structure, and you follow it or you get arrested, you get kicked out, whatever the case is. So I can't tell if they're just stupid or anti-military or both. Kind of seems like both to me. So he tells Lee, you can't go, send somebody out there. That's why we have an army. We go back to the present day timeline. They're kind of wandering around, and it looks like after maybe a couple hours, they find their dad. He's alive, and right before this part where the image is, they're waving to him and he's waving them back, like, get out of here. And you can see he has one of those gamma simulator things on his truck. So he's trying to call Godzilla or lure him or whatever the case is. We don't know. Because they see him from a distance and then he drives off. We flash back to the past for a minute. Keiko and Randa are frustrated with Lee because he was supposed to be attending some event to secure their funding while they came and dealt with this gamma simulator and the science side of it. And obviously he just showed up here. So that's really all that happens in this scene. Tim and Monarch show up in a helicopter pretty much right away. Not sure how they got to Algeria that fast. Whatever. But they're right on their heels. They fly around for, I guess, a little bit because we don't know how far their base is. And they see the main characters. Back to the past again, we see Keiko and Lee, and this is actually kind of a nice scene where he's explaining the decision that he made, and he's like, I don't want to worry about the greater good if I can just be with you or whatever. It's worded less cheesy than what I just said, but I'm paraphrasing. And she's like, no, you do care. Like, she knows how he actually is and just what he's saying. So that actually is a nice scene that he's like struggling to choose between the woman that he likes and he's trying to protect her and doing his duty as a military man and just a human being in general. Their little gamma thing was floating out there, and it gets tossed at them by Godzilla. And you can see Godzilla in the background. It's a pretty neat shot. The only thing I'm curious about is how much of Godzilla we'll actually see. Because Lee sees him and he goes, oh no, we didn't kill him. We didn't kill him at all. And I think the implication is that he's much bigger now. And Godzilla surfaces, kind of roars a little bit, and then swims off. And that's when Lee says, Jesus Christ, we didn't kill it. And then that is paralleled with the present day, where Godzilla is rising up out of this mountain or cliff. And I kind of wish that they had made this sand, because the way that they set it up, all of the main characters and their little golf cart and stuff are like on Godzilla's back. And as the mountain's slowly breaking apart, they're all rolling down. There's crumbling rocks everywhere and stuff. And sand would be more like a snow avalanche type situation, where I think it's pretty believable for them to survive. But this, when you have like big chunks of rock everywhere, for people who don't know, a rock the size of your fist falling from like 10 feet above your head can kill you or put you in a coma. Like, it'll really mess you up. So for them to do this, I think it's just a little bit over the top, but it's a pretty cool reveal for Godzilla kind of standing up in the middle of the desert. I'm assuming we're not going to get an explanation for how he got there, since the last time that we saw him in this universe was Godzilla was in San Francisco, because this is like 2015 or whatever, and that one came out in 2014. Either way, I guess we'll see what they do with it. Here's a thing where we get a neat little shot, and you can see Godzilla's eye, the pupil kind of dilates. And after he walks away, Kate's like, did you see that? He was looking at me. And Lee's like, yeah, he was. So I'm assuming there's going to be some tie here with her, her dad, and Randa or Keiko. Here's just another pretty cool little shot. And I'm assuming that Lee is not lying, but the helicopter flies above Godzilla just waiting for him to stand up. So of course he stands up and they hit one of his spikes and they crash. And then after this, Lee goes, there were no survivors in the helicopter, which means Tim, who was like the lamest antagonist ever, got a very appropriate death for how lame he was, I guess. That their death was just floating there until Godzilla stood up. Kind of anticlimactic for the guy who's been like the main one pursuing them for the whole season so far. Back to the past one more time. Lee, Keiko, and Randa get back to their base. And before they go in here, Lee's like, look, I disobeyed an order. We need to tell them everything so that we don't come back empty-handed. They walk in, and this guy who asked if Keiko was Japanese is now in charge of all the Monarch operations. And Lee has been demoted or kicked out or whatever. We don't know exactly yet. But he lost his position, so he doesn't have control over what's going on now. And this guy demands a full report from all of them by the end of the day about what they found. Back in the present one more time, Lee is like, hey, let's follow him. And Kate's like, what do you mean? What are we going to do, kill him? And Lee's like, no, we're not going to try to kill him. I'm trying to help him. So I have no idea what his plan is. He hasn't explained anything. And this is the kind of thing that annoys me a little bit when it's like, why don't you just tell us what you're doing so then we can decide with the information at hand? But instead, he's like, give me the map. Like, I need it. He's like, I'll give you guys plenty of food and water. There's a village about 10 clicks that way, and points them in the right direction because they all say, we're going after Hiroshi Randa, who's their dad. So Kate, Kentaro, and May are all going after the dad. And I'll be honest, I don't particularly like this flip in Kate's character, who's been calling her dad a piece of crap the whole time. I know they kind of try to justify it, but really Kentaro's the only one who's been wanting to find him the most. Kate was just kind of stuck along for the ride before, as was May. And at this point, they're walking toward the village, and May decides to tell these two that she betrayed them to Monarch. And then she very vaguely says, you know, I pissed off some people. I couldn't do anything. I have a bunch of money saved up because I couldn't spend it anywhere, so they wouldn't catch me. and I fled to Tokyo. And Kate is like, screw you, like I'm done with you. And this is a weird thing because in the show, they've all only been together 3 or 4 days, it seems like. And I know like when you're in a high stress situation with people, you can grow together faster and all that kind of stuff. But they haven't really ever formed a connection. They've been kind of just bickering the whole time. And they've all been kind of dicks the whole time. So this whole thing just kind of doesn't work for me. That's the end of the episode. As far as this show goes, it's one of the better ones. As far as TV shows in general, it's okay. I wish they had cut down on some of the overt culture war garbage. It's just annoying. And I'll be honest, the way that the show's been going, I actually don't expect to see much more Godzilla. I think they'll be following him with like gamma signals or something. And then we probably won't see him again until the very end, is my guess. Partially because it's a TV series, so the budget's not the same. And then partially just because this show really hasn't been doing much of that. And then the description for the next episode also leads me to think we're going to get some deep dive into May's background, who I do not give a shit about. I think it's been more of like the quote-unquote dramatic stuff going on with their personal lives that I just don't care about. That's my guess. Hopefully I'm wrong. It'd be nice if there's only a few minutes of that, but I'm not particularly hopeful. I guess we'll see. At this point, we're 60% through the season. Maybe these last 4 episodes can redeem the first almost 2/3. All right, that's it for me for this one. I'll be here next week. Did you like this episode more than the recent ones? Do you think we'll see more Godzilla? I'm curious what people's predictions are, or if by this point people are just done with it, or they're so invested that they don't care about Godzilla either way. But yeah, like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.